Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here and watching online. It's great to have you. We are continuing our series, Rebel Savior. And as we do today, I just talked to a friend of mine yesterday, actually. I've heard stories from him before, but he is a pilot. He's been a friend for years. We've been hunting all over in Canada, bear hunting, deer hunting. We've been elk hunting together. We've been a lot. But this guy's a pilot. He calls himself a glorified bus driver. Like, I can't believe it. What he does, he works for a company that flies private jets for people who don't own their own jet, but they want to fly. Like, he does a lot of, flying people out to these red carpet things. So a lot of movie stars, a lot of rock people, rock and roll music type people, a lot of really business people and stuff. And he flies these people around this company that he works for. So he's always flying different people. Anyway, he's told me stories over the years about how some people can be just, he says this to himself. He says, who do these people think they are? And just yesterday, he told me a story, and he said, please don't say who it is. I could get in trouble. So I can't tell you who it was, but it's probably one of the most popular female singers, dancers that there is today. And she is engaged to be married to this other guy who is a baseball player. Okay, maybe you can guess, but I can't tell you who it is. Anyway, so he is the pilot, and these people are coming to the airplane, and his company tells him who's coming, and he has rules that he has to abide by. And one of those rules is you have to have a valid driver's license, or you have to have a photo ID to get on the plane. And these people came, and she was very nice, and they had some other people around them, and this guy, her fiance, had a couple of helpers with him. Just people to do stuff for him. And he kind of walks in. These people walk in with people doing everything for them. And as he is going to get on the plane, he checks for your ID. You have to have your ID so I let you on. And the guy says, well, I don't have an ID. You know who I am. He said, yeah, I know who you are, but it's a law. I can't break this law. You have to. And the guy walks right past him, just as arrogant as could be, and starts walking up the steps. He gets on the plane, and my friend had to follow him up in there and say, I'm sorry, I need your... While he was talking to him, this guy put on his earplugs and started listening to music, and it was just like, I don't care who you are, don't you know who I am? I don't need to follow the rules. It was a horrible situation, and he said, it's just this attitude of some people that he flies around because they're famous or because they're rich or because they think they're better than everybody else. I don't have to follow the rules. And as he was telling this story, and he went on and on about so many details about this story, he said, all he could think of was, I would have punched the guy, but he was bigger than me, okay? But he didn't do that. And he said, who do these people think they are? Like, they think they don't have to follow the rules. They think they're so great that they don't have to do what everybody else does. I'm above everybody else. I'm famous. I got all the money in the world. I can do what I want. And they really just disregard people, treated him like he was a nobody. He is responsible for this flight. He has to follow his rules. So he's not taking off. He can't. It's against the rules, and he would get in trouble. He might lose his job. He gets a call from his superior, his boss that owns this company that flies these people around, and says, hey, we know so-and-so's on your flight, because he's got these little assistants around him all the time, and they're taking care of everything while he doesn't think about nothing. And his boss said, well, you know what, we know who he is. We go ahead and fly him. And he said, I'm the one that's going to lose my job. This is an FAA thing. I have to follow it. And his boss said, no, you just go ahead. All this clout that these people have. And you know what? It's like this kind of a thing of some people think they're better than other people because they're rich and famous or powerful or whatever. And they really do treat other people like they're nothing. I don't have to follow the rules. I don't do that. And you and I have probably never been there. We've probably never met somebody like that. Maybe we have. But let's bring it down a notch on a little bit more of a subtle way is, I think every one of us have experienced that, or even most of us been that way, but on a much, much lower basis. A story of my brother, pastor of, what's that church called? Oh yeah, Maranatha. I remember one time when I was working with him, there was a pastor on staff, and that pastor on staff had kind of yelled at the secretary of the church and kind of degraded her. And my brother confronted him and said, why are you talking? how could you talk to her like that? That was terrible. And he said this. He said, well, she's just the secretary. He lost his job that day, that moment. Who do you think you are to refer to somebody as just a secretary? And think about that. Sometimes you and I maybe have done that in the past. And maybe if we haven't verbalized it, maybe we've thought about that sometimes. Well, you're just the garbage man. You're just the delivery person. Or, you're just the waitress. Or things like that. And I think it's in our culture, and you and I are affected by it, and we don't even realize it. But we're affected by this unconscious leveling of I'm above you, you're below me, you're above me. And we kind of got this radar going out that people are more important than other people, and we kind of live in this realm. And the realm that Jesus lived in was the same way. It was, matter of fact, even a little bit worse. When Jesus was living on this earth, the culture around him was very much like that. There were a few rich people, and everybody else was extremely in poverty, very poor. And the rich people enslaved the poor people. The rich people treated like, I can do everything. You're all my servants. I'm more important. They lived that way. It was normal for culture. It was just the way it is. And that was true with politics. If you were part of the Roman government, especially higher up in the leadership, that everybody served you. You were above everybody else. You didn't, the rules didn't apply to you. You can do whatever you want. And it was the same with the religious people. And we talked a little bit about this last week, but when Jesus was here, it was same with the religious people. There was, I'm more important than you. You're not as important than me. You're just a peon. I'm closer to God. And here's the deal. When Jesus was around this stuff, he was completely against it. Completely. This was normal. This was life. Nobody even thought anything of it. They just thought that's the way it is. That's normal. But Jesus completely rebelled against that. He was counter to that. Matter of fact, he was almost opposite of that, completely opposite of this whole idea of some people are higher than others and some people are more important than others. This reminds me of a dance that Ross does. Okay, anyway, but he was a rebel. I mean, Jesus comes on the scene. We've been doing this for thousands of years. This is the way life's always been. This is the way the human race is. And Jesus comes on the scene and says, no way. I am not following that. I am not going there. He brings in a complete opposite teaching. He stands completely against it. He is standing out like this rebel. That he doesn't follow what everybody else is doing. He doesn't follow the religious system. He doesn't follow what the government does. All of this stuff, he doesn't follow it. Matter of fact, he's just the opposite. Listen to what Jesus himself said. He said this, the greatest among you will be your servant. Wow. I mean, that is the opposite of what culture is. That is the opposite of what you and I think. We do. This is like a whole new teaching. This completely is opposite of what we're brought up to think, of what we're brought up to do, is against culture completely. And that is this whole idea that the greatest among you, it says the greatest person equals the servant. The greatest around you is the servant. Think about how that just rattled them, and he couldn't believe it. Like, the greatest is the servant. You mean the servant who comes in and cleans the floor and does this stuff and makes my food is a greater person than I am? Well, wait, I'm the one that's above them. And Jesus said, the greatest person is equal to the one who is the most a servant. And he didn't just teach it. He just didn't say, hey, here's some good ideas. Here's a good way to do it. I want you guys to go and do it. Far more than that. Jesus actually lived it. He displayed it. I think sometimes we think the more money we have, the better education we have, the better job, the better career. Sometimes we start to think we're above other people. Don't we? Maybe some of us more than others, but it's always there to kind of think, I'm a step above. I'm just a little better because of my education, because of my money, or whatever it is. Jesus came on the scene and blew everything away. Listen to this story. This happened at the Last Supper. Some of you are familiar with it. But Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. Talk about being successful. Talk about like being above everybody else. This is Jesus, the Son of God. Everything that is created was created by him and for him. Okay, there's no higher. Okay, that he knew that all things were under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. Listen, Jesus knew who he was. He knew that I am God and I created all of you. I am God and I created all of this. I am God and I have control of everything. If there was ever a king, I am way above that. If there was ever a wise person, I'm way above that. If there was ever success, I'm way above that. There is nobody higher than me. There is no one more important in this world ever than me. I'm number one. And listen to what he does. He's number one. He's the greatest. And he says, after that, he got up from this meal. He took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He starts out by acknowledging, there's nobody greater than me. Guys, I'm God. I created everything. And right after he says that, he wraps his towel around him. He gets some water, and he gets down to the lowest position of any servant in this world. In that culture, the lowest of the low. If you had servants, the lowest one would wash people's feet as they came into your house. These are people that are nobodies, that you wouldn't talk to. And Jesus becomes the lowest servant of all and actually goes around the table and washes their feet. There's nobody greater than me, but I am going to wash your feet. The greatest person is a servant. Goes on. Jesus explains to them after Peter says, hey, wash my whole body, and he goes into this whole thing. But after this, he says this, I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I didn't just tell you what to do. I set you an example. There's nobody greater than me, and I'll take the humblest role that a human being could do for an example for you to do. He goes, very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than one who sent him. In other words, Jesus is saying this, listen, hey, you guys, you are not above me. You are not greater than me. And I set you this example, okay? And he goes on and he says, now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Now that you know these, now that I just told you the greatest person is a servant, I've displayed it, I've showed it to you, and it says, now you'll be blessed if you do it. And I got to be honest with you, and I talked to the staff about this. Usually, I am completely sure of what I'm going to say. Today, I just feel like I don't know exactly what this means. Does Jesus mean he wants us to wash each other's feet? I mean, what does it look like? This is a great teaching. This is very, very important for you and I to understand. But what does he mean? Wow, he humbled himself to the lowest position to serve other people, and I set you this example that you should do this to other people. And I think, does he mean actually wash feet? Does he mean an attitude? What does he mean? And as I really struggled with, what does that mean for you and I? How are we supposed to live our life? Does that mean that, you know what, if I have employees and they're doing a job, that I should do their job for them? I don't know. I can't imagine he means that. I can't imagine he means that, you know, that you'd give your time to every single person. You have things to do. You have time. You can't just do that. What does he mean? What do you think he means? Jesus said, the greatest person is a servant. I've set you this example. I want you to go do it. What do you think he means? And I think we get a little bit of idea. As hard as this is to understand, I'm telling you, this is a tough one. I think the Apostle Paul explains further what Jesus meant by that as he says this: do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. I think this is what he means by be a servant of all. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, this is what Jesus did on that night. In humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of the others. If your relationships with one another, have the same mindset of Christ Jesus. What Paul is saying is this: remember Jesus' example? Remember, I want you to have the same mindset. I want you to have the same attitude. I want you to think the same way that Jesus thought, not selfishly. I want you to put others before yourself. I don't want you to think selfishly. And he says, be just like Jesus. Listen to how humble this guy was. He says, being like Jesus. Who? Being in very nature God. He was God, but he humbled himself. He did not consider equality with God something to be used in his own advantage. He did not walk on this earth like, I am God. I'm getting on that airplane whether I got an ID or not. You know who I am. I'm great. Serve me. That wasn't his attitude at all. Something to be advantage. He said, rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. The nature of a servant. Being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a human being, as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. He said, live your life just like Jesus. As Jesus' example that night that he set that example by washing their feet. I want you to have the same mindset. I want you to think like Jesus did and humble himself completely. Back what he said earlier was this: in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but the interest of others. If you are dealing with trying to set up some boundaries in your life, this is going to hit you in your face. If you are codependent in some way, this is going to be against everything you've heard. I got to protect myself. I got to value myself. And here this comes along and says, no, you're nothing and everybody else is greater than you. You look at other people first. And I got to be honest with you, I'm not an expert in this. But I just want to tell you what I think it probably means is this: that when we are in a healthy place and we know who we are, Jesus knew who he was. Jesus was in a healthy place. He voluntarily became a servant. He wasn't put down by other people. He wasn't a slave to other people. I think he would have said, no, wait a minute. You're not going to make me do this or this. I voluntarily do it. And to the people that he was ministering to, there was a sense of health that they had as well. In other words, he ministered to people. He looked at other people. What they needed was above what he needed because he himself was healthy. And if the people that he was doing that to, if they were taking advantage, if they were using him, if they were abusive, I don't think he would have done that. So I don't have the exact answer, I'll be honest with you. But I do know that if you are healthy and know who you are, God has told us this: the greatest person is a servant. The person who looks at what other people need first, cares about other people's cares and that stuff first. I've seen this, and it's amazing. I know that a lot of us are familiar with John the Baptist. John the Baptist had a great ministry, right? He was baptizing thousands of people, and he was the big name in town. And Jesus comes along. And John the Baptist's staff leaves him and goes follow Jesus. Wow, you're on my team, you're with me, you're helping me, and all of a sudden you go and follow Jesus. He could have been angry, he could have been jealous. He could have started cutting down Jesus because, after all, if his ministry is successful, he must be doing something wrong. That's a private joke. But he didn't. You know what he said? I must decrease, and he must increase. I worked for a guy one time. His name is John Gordon. He is the owner of, or was the owner of John Co. Dye Company. I worked for him for 5 or 6 years. And it was really interesting. This guy, he was on the cover of a dye world organization, worldwide. He was the dye maker of the year. Great publication. We're talking top dog of these dye companies. And I worked for him. And just about every morning, not always, you can imagine he's a pretty important person, multimillionaire. The guy's got everything, he's very important, he's all that. But when I worked for him, most of the time when he came into the business, into the shop, he'd walk down on the floor and he would do this. He would stop at every station and every machine. He would stop and he would chat. Like he had nothing better to do. I don't know. I'm sure he did. But he would chat. And here was the thing that was so impressed me, that he would pour into our lives. I know that he taught me so much. He's the first one that introduced me to Larry Burkett. He's dead now, but he was a financial guy, and he was kind of like, Financial Peace University before that ever was, and all that stuff. And he would ask, how is your family? How are things? Even to this, hey, how's your car running? He sold me one of his cars one time at a really good deal. You would never know when he's standing there that this guy's world famous, that this guy owns everything, he's so rich, and he would just communicate. And I got to think that that's what Jesus meant by being a servant, to not think more highly of yourself than you ought, but to see that, not to be selfish, but to look at other people's needs and where other people are at. In other words, take an interest in other people, no matter who you think you are or who you are. There was a pastor in Fort Collins, Colorado, and it's Timberline Church. And I went out there, I met this guy here in Minnesota, and then I went out there and spent a few days. This man impressed me so much. I think I shared this once several years ago, but I came back and told our staff, I said, now there's a guy I could work for. Different than anybody I've ever met. Different than any pastor I've ever met. Pastors are all weird. This guy was amazing. This guy was amazing. His attitude, it was his attitude. And his church is several thousand people, and he could have a big head. And his attitude is this. Most pastors walk into a room, and everybody should go, hey, I'm here, This guy's attitude was different. He'd walk into a room and go, hey, you're here. You're the one that's valuable. And I know we all say that and we work on it, but this guy was genuinely that way. It was genuinely like, you're here. The attitude for his whole church was not, hey, community, we're here for you. His attitude was, hey, church, the community is here. Like, they're the ones that are valuable. It's not us, it's people. His attitude, it carried on in everything that he did, was, you're the one that's special, not me. The community's what's special, not the church. And it was like that attitude of really being a servant of other people. And it was just amazing. And it really drew me. And I thought, that's what Jesus is talking about. Treating other people better than yourself. Treating other people first. What is their interest? And I thought, what does that look like? What would that look like in your life? And I don't know. I can only imagine. And you can, what would that look like in your life if you honestly thought, people are what's important. I'm no better or more important than anybody else. I want to look at other people as more important than me. I want to care about other people before I care about myself. I don't want to be selfish. I want to be selfless and care about others. What would that look like? And I think, it could look different for all of us. It might mean that you do a favor for the people you work with. I don't know. It might be that you mow your neighbor's lawn. I don't know. It could look like so many things. But I think the important thing here, there's an attitude. There's an attitude that we walk around in our life that, hey, it's not about me. It's not about me. It's about you. It's about others. It's about the people I come in contact with. And I think, just your family. Hi, what are you doing? There's some people in my life that I meet with once in a while, and I've noticed that when I'm with them, it's all about them. And like I sit there and listen to them and what they're doing in their life, and they never ask me a question. It's all about them. And I just think, you know what, that comes across only because there's an attitude on the inside that I'm not important. Oh, they'll say I am, but I'm not important. If people were important, how would we treat them? I think maybe we would just say hi to more people. Hi. And genuinely say, if we have time, how are you? How's your family? How are things? And learning people's history, their past. You can't know somebody unless you know their past, who they are. Maybe take time with people in relationships. Now, that doesn't mean everybody. We don't have time for that. But to live with that attitude of people are more important than we are. Who are you? You're important. I think of this, like, okay, this is great. Jesus says, act like this, and okay, people are more important than me, but have you ever thought, well, what's in it for me? Because Jesus said this. He said, you will be blessed if you do this. In other words, Jesus is saying this, listen, you will be better off if you do this. You, on the inside, you are going to have a better life if you do this. You are going to have more peace in your life if you do this. I mean, Jesus washes their feet. He has this attitude, and then he says, you will be better off if you do this. If you have this attitude of serving others, like, how can that better my life? How can I be healthier as a person if I do this? And I think it all comes down to this, and this is where you and I should really think about, I want to be like Jesus in this area because my life becomes better. I've said this a few times now from church, but I was so moved when Jeff Foxworthy, I saw Jeff Foxworthy say this. He was talking about that he volunteers at a soup kitchen. He volunteers his time in a homeless shelter, and he does those kind of things. And he always says this. He said, my life is always the best when I'm not the center of it, when it's not about me. And you stop and think about that. He says, my life is always the best when I'm not focused on me. Because I really think this, that you and I, as we focus on ourselves, a self-centered person is not a content person at all. Think about this. A self-centered person is never content. A self-absorbed person is never happy, never content, never has peace. A self-focused, a self-centered person is always trying to please themselves more and more and more and more, always trying to get people to think there's something, always trying to do that. There is never any peace, there's never any contentment for a self-absorbed person. And Jesus said, if you treat others better than yourself, if you're looking to the interest of others and not just what's about you, you will be blessed. There will be a peace and a contentment and a joy in your life that can't come any other way. It's almost like being thankful. When you and I are thankful, when we have gratitude, we are happy. It's the same thing when we're not looking at ourselves and we're really living our life focused on other people, we are the most fulfilled. But let me tell you what doesn't fulfill. When we just put on an act. Okay, I'm going to treat you, and I'm going to say hi to you, and I'm going to do this, but inside, nothing's changed. But inside, I'm going to do that just so you think I'm a great servant. Nothing's changed. It's got to change from in here. We need to have the same attitude as that of Christ Jesus, who became a servant, who humbled himself. When our attitude changes, the attitude changes from, it's not all about me. It's not all about what I can get and what I can achieve and what people see in me. It's not about my success. When it stops being about me, internally perspective, and starts being about other people, you will be happier. You will have more content. As a matter of fact, I told you a long time ago I struggled with anxiety attacks and things. I remember a counselor kind of told me, he said, a lot of times, not everybody, but a lot of times when people struggle with that, it's because we're so focused on ourselves. And a lot of times a good help for that is to be focused on something bigger than yourself, focused on other people. And how are you? And what's going on in your life? And how can I help you? Can I pray for you? And just value you. Wow, you do that? That sounds like fun. That's great. Take an interest in other people. And our own flaws, our own insecurities, our own fears, our own anxieties fade when we start looking at other people. And other people are valuable and other people are awesome. When we do that, we are blessed. Not only do we not focus on our shortcomings and we're so internally focused so much, but also we discover people are awesome. To enjoy the people around you. I'll tell you what, like just in this room, and every one of us and the people you know, the people that are in our life, God says that they are a gift to us. You're a gift to me. You're the one that's valuable to me, not me. The people in your life, they're a gift to you. They're the ones that are valuable. They're the ones that are precious for you. To appreciate other people and do that. So anyway, hey, wrap all of us up. You know what? Jesus really rebelled against this whole thing of I'm better than you. He did. He said, he said this right down to it. The greatest person equals the greatest servant. That is an attitude. I don't know what it looks like. That is an attitude that I am not number one. Countercultural. That's why Jesus rebelled against this whole system. The whole world, the human race is all about I'm number one. What would it look like in your life if you were no longer number one? You have to be healthy, know your value in God, and you are special and you are precious. But to actually live a life, have an attitude that, you know what's special about my life? The people in it. The people in my life are more special than me. How would that change your life? How would that make your work environment better if you valued the people at your work? If you took interest, put them first there. How would it look if you're driving to work during rush hour and you're not the center of the world? Like the person who has the spot in front of you on the road, it's not your spot anyway. You'd have more peace. It's not about me. They're in a hurry too. They need to get there. You know what? I've done bonehead moves like that too. We can forgive them. Why? Because they're a valuable person. And we're not so critical and judgmental about things in our life. I believe Jesus when he said that. I believe him. You will be blessed when you do this. Our lives will be better when we put others first. When it's not all about what I want, it's not about me, it's not about how I feel, but it's about you. How do you feel? The people in our lives. We need the Holy Spirit. We need God to transform our heart. If this is going to be an attitude change, we need God to change our attitude. So with that, I would like to pray today. Father, don't even know what it's like. Haven't seen it much. Some of us are probably have a further way to go than others. But Lord, I can't genuinely treat others better than myself. I can't genuinely see the value in other people as higher than mine unless you change my perspective. Father, I pray that you would fill each one of us, that we would be so content and so filled, so confident and sure of who we are, that we are your children, that you have blessed us, that we have a promise of eternity we have nothing to worry about, that we can actually look to the interests of others above our own, that we can actually value other people above ourselves. When we run into somebody, that we would honestly feel the most important person here is the other one. The most important person in this group is the other one. The most important person in this relationship is the other one. Father, transform our hearts to bring healing in our lives, to bring peace in our lives, as we stop thinking so much about ourselves and start thinking more about others. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.